Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to this Techstrong learning experience brought to you by Aqua Security. If you are here for our CISO panel, you are here in the right place. My name is Cody, and I'm the host of Techstrong Learning, and we've got an exciting panel ahead. Before I hand things off to our moderator today, I do just want to handle a couple of our housekeeping notes. First off, today's session is being recorded. So if you miss any of our discussion, perhaps you'd like to rewatch or share with a friend, the on-demand recording will be made available shortly after we conclude this live session today. If you'd like to engage with us, there are a couple of options to do so. I'll direct you to the right side of the screen where the first tab you'll see says chat. Right there, I'd like you to start testing that functionality out for us. Let us know where you are joining us from. We know we have a global audience and we kind of want to get a feel on where everyone is. Now, if you have any questions, we do direct you to send those into the Q&A tab. If you send them into the chat, we will still try to get to it, but the Q&A tab just helps us keep things in order. If you jump over to where it says handouts, you'll see there are a couple of resources that are uploaded for you, so feel free to grab those. And of course, before we close out, we are giving away 4 $25 Amazon gift cards, so be sure to stick around for the duration of our conversation today. So on to our topic. This is CISO panel, tips for optimizing a cloud-native security stack in 2023. And I'm joined today by John Masserini, Senior Advisor at TAG Cyber, Ira Winkler, Field CISO and Vice President of CI, and leading our conversation today is Joe Murphy from Aqua Security. So Ira and John, thank you both so much for joining us today. Joe, do you want to get this conversation rolling?
Thank you, Cody. Yes. So hello, everyone, and welcome. Hope you're all enjoying your days. My name is Joe Murphy with Aqua, and today we're going to have some fun talking about consolidation, optimization of the cloud security tech stack. So current state of affairs, budget's mostly flat, the threat landscape continues to evolve. More folks are adopting cloud native, multi-cloud. It's a whole bunch of things to make it more complicated. So we hope that you walk away with an understanding and some actionable items that will allow you to mitigate risk and ensure that you're setting yourself and your organization up for success. So quick run through of the agenda. We'll zoom out, discuss some challenges, the vendor landscape, and then we'll dive into some tips for optimizing an effective cloud native security practice. Discuss which areas to consider focusing your efforts on. Time is our most valuable resource. We don't have much of it. And then we'll wrap up with how a platform approach can deliver business value beyond just cost savings and without sacrificing performance. So as Cody said, with me today, we have 2 distinguished CISOs with very impressive backgrounds spanning, some of the world's largest brands in the U.S. intelligence community. So please join me in welcoming John and Ira. John and Ira, thank you guys so much for joining. You want to do a quick, 30-second introduction each?
Okay, well, I'll go first, I guess. But anyway, my name's Ira Winkler. I'm Field CISO for CI, and I'm also author of the books Security Awareness for Dummies, You Can Stop Stupid, Advanced Persistent Security, among other books. And I guess, like you said, I was formerly Chief Security Architect at Walmart, Chief Security Strategist at HP, worked for NSA for a while, and otherwise have fun.
Love it.
Wow, how to follow that up. John Masserini. I am currently, as Joe said, the Senior Advisor for TAG Cyber, which is an industry analyst firm. Prior to joining TAG about a year ago, I was a 3-tour, 18-year CISO throughout the telecom industry, finance, and publishing. And prior to that, about 12 years of security consulting. So all in all, about 30 years in the field. So looking forward to today's conversation.
Thank you both. So I just want to, set the table, quickly talk about some of the challenges that CISOs are facing in 2023. Ira, I was listening to a talk that you gave recently. I don't know if it was at RSA this year or a couple of years ago, around budget constraints and
Mhm.
allowing teams to get the security budget that they deserve.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that?
So basically, like right now, Psy does risk optimization. And that was what I actually started writing about that, dating myself in 1996 in my first book, Corporate Espionage. Because the problem I see in cybersecurity, and I've seen this since 1996 and before, frankly, that the problem is CISOs get the budgets that they deserve, not the budgets that they need. And they need to learn to deserve more. They need to learn specifically to deserve what they need. And how they do that is by what I call risk optimization, which is essentially figuring out what are the vulnerabilities that you have in general and what do the vulnerabilities specifically cost. And then based upon how much it costs to mitigate a given vulnerability, you can make a rational cost justification. Because the way currently we do cybersecurity budgets is you walk into your like a budget meeting, or you're sitting there, well, what's my budget last year? Is there a chance I can get a little bit more this year? And what can I do for that little budget more? Maybe I'll get rid of one thing and add another thing. And that to me is insanity from a programmatic perspective. You never see a CFO say, oh, give me a little bit more than what I have. They have a cost justification for everything that they need. And CISOs need to be able to specify what they need and what's the return on investment for it. Because a lot of CISOs I call losers, honestly, because they walk in, it's like, oh, gee, I cost the company money. I need to cost them a little bit more money. How do I get that little bit more money? As opposed to saying you're actually returning investment. They give you one thing, you give them something back. I was talking, for example, to my friend Dan Meacham, who's CISO of Legendary Entertainment, like at RSA this time. And he was saying that, first off, he protects some of the most valuable intellectual property that's out there, multi-billion-dollar movies. And then at the same time, because of his efforts, he's able to actually earn money back for Legendary Entertainment because of all his anti-piracy efforts and his ability to, frankly, get legal judgments against people who are stealing their intellectual property. That is how you get the budget that you need, because otherwise you get the budget you deserve, and without the right technology and information behind you, you really don't deserve anything.
Yeah, I'd have to, I couldn't agree with that more. It's, we have always been kind of approaching our world very tactically, right? It's been very point solution based. How much money can I get? What can I buy for that money? And when you step back, and Joe, we were kind of chatting about this before, we wonder why we have 120 or 150 different solutions in our environment, right? And there was a study recently about, there's well over 100 pieces of software that security teams rely on. Well, it's no wonder if you just listen to kind of what you described. But if I buy something this year, I'm not looking for an overall solution. I'm not looking for an overall platform because I'm not getting the money for it, right? Mm-hmm. And it's kind of this very ugly cycle that the security teams and the CISOs kind of get stuck in, right? And getting out of that is a challenge. I know that one of the places I worked at a while ago, we were able to really demonstrate how much revenue the website generated. And not only that, but during which times, right? So, there were certain times of the day when that website was completely, just obliterated and not obliterated, but busy. And other times when it was very quiet, right? So how do we build a security program to really expand and contract to deal with the website activities, but not overburden the company with spend? I mean, and that to me, and that was years ago, that was a critical point where I personally learned a lot about finding different ways to bring that value and really help the business understand that you're not just a black hole, taking money, you're actually contributing back to the business.
Yeah. And just to add to it, I mean, one of the things, so like, that's why we have attack path visualization as one of our critical components of our cyber risk quantification element. And you can actually, and I'm not saying you have to use our platform to do this, but we're able to map out where vulnerabilities are within a given organization and be able to figure out specifically which vulnerabilities you can mitigate that might, for lack of a better term, be a choke point. And you could get rid of, you can put a countermeasure there and then get rid of all the other countermeasures, which are, I'm not going to say worthless, but at that point redundant.
Sure.
And be able to save a lot of money that way. And, that involves, we're going to get, maybe we'll get to this, but with machine learning, different applications of mathematical principles, you could look at flow theory and things like that, that allow people to better determine where vulnerabilities and therefore countermeasures are going to be the best return on investment.
Yeah, and I think that's where, especially when it comes to machine learning, and I shy away from AI, but to me, right? Because look, we all just got back from RSA, so it's the buzzword. But there are some practical applications that I think would benefit this industry in general, machine learning, and some more advanced with that, to do exactly what you're saying, right? There's just a tremendous amount of opportunity here.
Yeah, and the thing is, and I think, sorry, this is off topic for this, but just in general, I think the problem is most people don't understand what machine learning actually is. They think it's some wondrous thing related to artificial intelligence, which has something to do with robots taking over the world. The reality of the situation is machine learning is really just a more advanced set of statistics and different types of mathematical calculations that allow people to take in more data, allow the parsing of data. And again, it's the complexity of the mathematical algorithms when you actually look at them that allow you to be more specific into decisions being made, the capability of those decisions being made, and so on. And it's not that previously, we were such losers that we just had old statistics, but there was an advance in mathematics. Mm-hmm. There is an advance in the ability of computers to process data quicker, store data much more effectively, and therefore we can go ahead and, like the whole concept of big data, that was the buzzword of the past. Machine learning is how you take the big data and make it more useful by applying the mathematical algorithms. Well, anyway, that's my tangent.
Yeah, well, no, but I think it really does apply, right? Because I think we tend to get stuck in, what we have and what we're using, we're comfortable with, so we keep using it, right? We never, you never really take that step back and go, has the industry changed? Has the science behind it changed, right? And I'm going to maybe pivot back to a little bit of the cloud stuff. When we look at identifying risk in the cloud and all of the challenges that are now coming out of that, we keep trying to throw our old process and our old solutions at it, and it's not doing a good job, right? When we go from this, we know our infrastructure, we know where things are, we know what's running on them, and now we're pivoting and going, okay, work streams can come up and go away in a heartbeat. We don't know if they're configured right. We don't know where they're going. We don't know where the data, the data stores are being duplicated and replicated and backed up. So conceptually, we have to start thinking differently, right? I mean, we'll have a whole nother conversation probably on this at another time, but I think that's the same challenge with some of the quantum things, right? Look, quantum isn't going to change the world, but we need to start thinking about it because it takes us decades to change our certificates or change our technology, right? As security professionals, we just get stuck in a rut and we keep using the same stuff. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges when we start looking at the cloud. We keep trying to throw our old processes at it, and it's not working.
Well, I actually think, and this is where, however, there are opportunities, because right now, the good or the bad, especially for Aqua, is a lot of people are generally not really securing their cloud the way it should be.
Right.
And if you're able to do things like, for example, apply flow theory, apply like what I mentioned with graphical theory and attack path visualization, you're really able to dig in and say, okay, where are the vulnerabilities most likely to be exploited? Where's the highest return on investment? So you could take another buzzword, a blue ocean approach to your secure cloud security posture, and then figure out, okay, using all these different types of mathematical models and stuff, where is the best place for me to apply the most valuable countermeasures? Again, where are the countermeasures I need? And that way I can know I deserve them.
So we touched a little bit on my next question, but we'll go for it anyway. So I know you both were just at RSA last week, right? So I'm assuming a lot of our audience too. Everyone's bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, excited, saw and heard a lot of great things. Now they're probably thinking, all right, how can we fit this into our operations? Does it fit to our strategy? Just that starting point alone, I can see a lot of challenges there. But, John, I think you said teams tend to have maybe 150 tools in their tool belt at a time. I mean, in your experience, is that accurate?
Look, I think this study, I think it's a bit high, but depending upon the breadth of what you consider a security tool, I don't think it's orders of magnitude off. I'll put it that way, right? I mean, from everything, if you're going to email security and antivirus to firewalls to multi-factor, there's a lot of stuff that tangentially falls into the security space. So, it's not that far off. I think one of the challenges we have here is I think most security teams turned a blind eye, not intentionally, but the cloud concept and DevOps kind of blossomed in a way, and because it's completely disconnected from the infrastructure, the security team didn't necessarily need to hear about it or know about it, or more importantly, approve it. So it just continued to go. But now the regulators are coming in, all the auditors are coming in and going, well, security team, you're in charge of risk. You need to get control of this, right? So one of the things that invariably, regardless of the size of the enterprise, where they're located, they all are surprised by how big and how advanced the cloud environment is when they finally start to dig into it, right? We have to go into it with the approach of we're already way behind. So how are we going to catch up? So when you look at a tool like Aqua, it's really important that, again, they're going into budget. Yes, we need a new tool because of this cloud thing, right? So there's already challenges and kind of solving that budget problem. But then going into the budget, it's really, or going into the solution, it's really something that needs to help them just understand the whole scope, right? The depth of what is going on in the environment, and really kind of figuring out ways to make it easier to manage. Because as soon as the security team, starts trying to put some controls around it, whether or not that they're restrictive, the DevOps teams are going to start complaining, right? So how do you get to that place where we can start putting some controls around? The DevOps team are still kind of fully functional, can still do their job. That's what I think, a solution like Aqua really has to kind of bring to the forefront.
Yeah. And you kind of asked two different questions. So first part of your question was, RSA and takeaways from there. The reality is, frankly, RSA is much more of a networking opportunity as opposed to a learning opportunity. And a good deal of the networking is the expo floor, walking around and finding friends for me. And when I walk around and just see things, there's a lot of vendors out there that are unfortunately doing exactly what I said the problem was before, which is just, okay, I have this new tool. You want to add this new tool to your stack. And it's like, gee, you look at it, yeah, kind of makes sense. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that's interesting. Okay, some privacy component to what I have. Privacy is important. Where does it really fit in my data breach? You have to think conceptually, where do all these things fit in? And then the other part of the question is, which kind of almost goes to that, is how many tools do people have, which is the other part of your question. And is it real? And then, and again, this is like our internal research, but we found that when we're able to map out, vulnerabilities and things, you could get rid of about 27% of your budget in most cases when you could take out redundant tools. Mm-hmm. If you can get fundamental things, because again, from the case studies we have, we're able to look at it and say, wait a second, again, here's some choke points, here's redundant tools, here's tools which aren't as needed, because even though it says it's a critical vulnerability, it's really, really difficult to get to. So you really don't have to waste a lot of money on it, and so on. And then when you can look at that, you can start to say, okay, where are more of the fundamental tools? Where are the things that are built into the environment? That's where Aqua kind of comes in for the most part, where, again, looking at like, okay, all the vendors are saying, buy me, buy me, buy me. Then the question is, okay, we need tools and technology that says, okay, where actually are the gaps that we're seeing? And are there other mitigating controls and things? Because, just for example, I can tell you with 100% certainty that any major corporation still has Log4j on their network, despite the fact it's a highly critical vulnerability that was massive headlines. And then people will say, oh my God, how do you have this on your network? The reality is you can't mitigate 1 million computers on your network effectively, but you put in mitigating controls such as shutting off access to the outbound, sorry, I forgot the actual, but mitigating, just turn off outbound DNS, for example, I think it was. And you can mitigate the fact Log4j exists on your network. That aside, that's what we have to start looking at. Now, again, we have to start coming down to, okay, where are the fundamental places? Where are the fundamental security tools we can put in place that can go ahead and mitigate problems proactively? And, to the point, obviously Aqua's sponsoring that, and they wouldn't have myself and John on here if we didn't believe that, putting it the tool set and platform that Aqua has does have that. But again, people need to, not buy Aqua blindly, no offense, but they need to look at your entire stack. And if there's a new tool that sounds interesting, how does it really fit in? Not is it a good tool, but how does it fit within the vulnerability stream that I have, so I can determine good but not necessary, or even it's a crappy thing, but it is necessary. So you need to figure those things out. And anyway, I'll leave it at that for now.
Yeah, and the only thing I'll add is, when we start, I think if you take that to the next level, you really kind of get to more of, the platform concept rather than the single tool concept, right? I mean, there's, if you look at the 4 or 5 different areas, vulnerabilities, configuration, data, identity, and user access of the cloud, each one of those has a bunch of vendors who can solve that specific problem. When you kind of, look at the bigger picture, isn't it better to understand the challenges of, yes, you have these vulnerabilities, but those vulnerabilities don't relate to access to the data, which is ultimately what you're trying to protect, right? And the interaction, and to your point, how you quantify the risk of the vulnerability to the situation, not just you have an existing vulnerability. I think that's what, when you start taking that step back, having a platform to do that for you rather than just single one-off tools is, I think that's really important.
Couldn't agree more, John. And I just want a quick note to the audience. Please submit your opinions, questions, concerns in the chat, as it makes for really good conversation. So I see someone asked a question here. Can you guys recommend any good security tools which will explore all vulnerabilities? I would advise, check out Aqua Trivi. Gentlemen, if you guys have any other opinions there.
I'm kind of biased. I do think that Security, our Hyver platform, does look at your organization's, again, attack path, risk quantification, and so on, and be able to look at, which vulnerabilities are there and which ones deserve to be mitigated, because that's what it was designed for. However, that could be taken another way. Are there any good security tools which explore all vulnerabilities? And that's kind of a vague question. I obviously answered it in a way that's biased towards my interests. But, if there's possibly, I'll let John answer if there's the other ways to do it.
I don't. I think we could probably spend an hour talking about different tools. So yeah, I'll just leave it at that. There are a number, and I would strongly encourage that when you use the term vulnerability, you just don't think CVE, right? Understand user vulnerability, understand data vulnerability, because it is very different. So.
All right. So now let's move on. Let's get into some actionable tips, just conversations around areas to consider when you're thinking about consolidating and optimizing your stack. So automation, we talked about it a little bit in the beginning, and Ira, I saved a golden nugget for you. The age of machines in cyber might ring a bell.
Yeah.
The next frontier. So my question to you guys, how can an organization ensure that they're leveraging automation effectively and efficiently?
So a lot of automation is built into decision making and fundamental decision making of things. So for example, I keep talking like, there's always this debate, and I don't know if we're going to touch upon skills in a while, but there's always this debate about education. And sure, if you want to get hired as a technologist in cybersecurity, don't get a degree, go ahead, listen to all those people. Oh, I could get, don't spend $80,000 on an education, go ahead and just get my certification, and then you'll have a job making $80,000 a year. Sure, if you want to actually make maybe 40 to 60,000. But the reality, though, is that the lower level jobs are probably going to be automated away. Mm-hmm. And if you don't have the communication skills, if you don't have, frankly, I mentioned machine learning, if you don't understand mathematics and how machine learning is programmed and how you can optimize algorithms and which attributes to put into those algorithms, you're going to be at a serious disadvantage. So let me get that out of the way. But again, for automation, we are talking about how can we have basic decisions made to streamline our decision-making, our processes, and so on. And to that extent, we're doing a better job. I mean, I was talking to, or I was, at RSA, I attended some event where, I'm terrible with names, but the CEO of, I think the CEO of Splunk, Gary Steele, I actually know him, but Gary Steele was talking about, for example, how they want an automated SOC, where you're going to be able to go ahead, get rid of all SOC level 1 analysts, for lack of a better way of doing it. And there's going to be pre-programmed ways to handle different types of alerts. And yes, that's complicated, but that's what machine learning does. Mm-hmm. And we're going to see a lot of this, and we're going to start to see it. I think there was a quote earlier this week that the CEO of IBM says a third of all IBM jobs can probably go away with machine learning. Wow. And it's likely going to happen. Now, what these people do and how these people choose to skill themselves and reskill themselves, I think, is a more important and better topic for conversation. Because frankly, if there's a way to automate anything, it will be automated. And that means basic, low-level gathering of facts and making decisions, and then automating the actions resulting from those decisions is what automation is essentially about. And if it can be done, it will be done. And, I'm not going to get into all the discussions like, gee, they raised the minimum wage, so they're going to get rid of, cashiers at McDonald's. It's like they're going to do that anyway. It doesn't have anything to do with the minimum wage. They're just going to do that. Likewise, people in SOCs and other basic cybersecurity decisions are going to be automated away, not because it's cheaper, but because it's just quicker, more effective, more efficient, and so on.
And supports, honestly, when we start talking about automation, I think too often we overlook the fact that especially in regulated industries, the fact that you have a predictable, documented model that shows how, when X happened, it caused Y, makes the auditors, the regulators, makes everybody much happier, right? Rather than saying, well, you went this way one time, you went that way another time, what was different, right? Being able to actually prove mathematically why the automations happen, what decisions the workflow is making, I think kind of goes right along with why we need to automate it, right? It's not just about efficiency. I mean, it's a large part about efficiency, but there's so many other benefits that come out of the automation side. It really is something that I don't think anybody could fight if they wanted to. It's coming, and it's happening probably a lot faster than we would think.
Yeah. And I would say in many cases, it's probably going to be a lot better. Like, so for example, I tell this story. It's a true story. It's almost a horror story for cybersecurity. Because what happened was I was a CISO for a mid-sized company a little while ago, and we ran a SOC. And what happened was one of our clients who, government agent, large government agency, basically, we didn't run their SOC. We didn't run their NOC either per se, but we got an email message from like my SOC got an email message forwarded saying, is this a phishing message? And they're like, my people looked at it, said, is this a phishing message? And it was a bomb threat. It said to the effect that we have planted a bomb in your data center. If you do not send us $5,000 in Bitcoin, we will blow it up. Don't call the police. Don't, I put cameras in there. I paid somebody to do this, blah, 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 trying to take care of all the bases. Then they sent it to my SOC, and like the SOC manager looked at it, goes, you're asking me if this is a phishing message? Is this a legitimate phishing message, or is this, he's like, it doesn't look like a real bomb threat. And they're like, okay. And they report it as a phishing message. As opposed to what I wrote Security Awareness for Dummies, because the problem in security awareness, and I'm going to get to how this relates to the automation part, is we keep training people to always be on the lookout for the wascally wabbit. If you know the Elmer Fudd Bugs Bunny reference, if Bugs Bunny puts on a wig and a dress, he doesn't know it's Bugs Bunny. And the problem is that that's what we're training people with security awareness. We're training people how to be Elmer Fudds, always looking for Bugs Bunny, not Bugs Bunny in a dress. And then we train them, I am a hacker, those videos like that. And every time they get something, they're like, oh, is this a hacker or is this not a hacker? As opposed to, I have this email message in front of me. What is the appropriate action for this email message? The appropriate action, after all their awareness training, they thought was, oh, is this a real hacker? Is this whatever? The real thing they should have been thinking, this is a threat of violence. What do I do with a threat of violence? I report a threat of violence through the police. And that's what should have been done. Now, automation would hopefully take these incoming messages, incoming help desk messages, and making better decisions on what to do in a given case where a NOC is not looking at it and saying, well, is this a phishing message? Or they can automatically determine threat of violence gets forwarded to the watch officer who gets, contacts the police. And we need things like that to take away, again, susceptibility to phishing, as well as better reaction to what should be done, whether it's a bomb threat, whether it's an actual request for service, or whatever the case may be.
Agreed. All right. So did you want to add something more?
No, not at all. That's a great story.
Yeah, that's scary, Ira. I assume everyone was okay at the end of the day. That's
good.
Oh,
no, it was. It was a really crappy, essentially it was a phishing message. It was just not handled in the right way at all. But anyway, it's like I've learned, when I looked at that, I'm like, isn't that special? Like the whole church lady, it's like I have my levels. Isn't that special, or could it be Satan? That's how I learned to look at things after 30 plus years.
All right. So, all right, you said, I don't know if we're going to talk about the skills gap earlier on. I think that might come in this next area of consideration here, which has to do with containers and serverless security. So, organizations that are, built in the cloud might have a little easier time here, but organizations that, are starting to adopt it and move more to a multi-cloud or, just cloud native approach might struggle a little bit. And I think it's really important to have a strong understanding of containers and serverless security. So my question to both of you is, how can organizations ensure that their containers and serverless environments are secure? What are some of the key risks that folks should be aware of, and how can those be mitigated? I feel like containers and serverless, it's fairly new. A lot of folks
Yeah.
been
Let me
around.
talk about it at a high level, and then I'll let John talk the technical level, because I don't have that deep hands-on technical
Okay.
level. I will admit that. At a high level, fundamentally from a strategic perspective, in my opinion, what really needs to happen is that the cybersecurity team should be able to go ahead and frankly and I know people hate this, but they should be able to say, here are standards we expect the development teams to be doing, that we expect you to build to these guidelines. There should be, like, I knew them most recently as SSPs. Like, I don't even remember what SSP stood for, but system security policies and things like that, where developers are developing with best security practices in mind. Because one thing that, again, I'm a person of a lot of pet peeves. One thing that has always been my pet peeve is that security is being bolted on as opposed to being built in. And I fundamentally think that, security is everybody's job. I'm like, no. People's job should be to do their job, and embedded within their job are just regular security practices. When you get in your car, it's a regular security practice these days. Put on your seatbelt, look around before you pull out of your parking space and whatever. You don't just say, my job is to drive from point A to point B. Security is embedded in the driving. Likewise, security practices should be embedded within the development teams themselves. Now, to the point where, are there people who can now take legacy programs and embedding security into, like, like Kubernetes, all that sort of stuff? That's a point where we have to stop and think, okay, the people who do this need to have the proper training and preparation. And one of my problems, again, with cybersecurity is we always think cybersecurity is like this special thing, as opposed to what it was when I started. Cybersecurity wasn't a special thing. You were like an IT person or whatever you were. And one day you were programming computer graphics, maintaining a database, or doing cryptanalysis like I did at NSA. And then the next day it's like, oh, Ira, you need to go ahead and, do configuration management and make sure all the software is secure. I'm like, okay. And it just was. And whatever it was, I learned, okay, what do I need to know for this job at this moment? We've taken away, what do we need to let people know as part of their job, and making it seem like we're the special snowflake that just floats down from the sky and covers everybody with all our little snowflake friends. We are not a snowflake. We need to get over ourselves. And we need to do that by saying, we don't do anything special. We just have these practices that need to be embedded with the development team. And then we do have oversight, but that's a separate issue.
All right, so I'm gonna kind of tie on to something Ira said earlier, right? But when we look at container and serverless environments, I actually want to tie it also back to what we said earlier. I think that is a prime spot for the automation, right? So if we tie the automation in with how we want those, Ira, we used to call them those gold images, right? But we know when you're standing up this workload, we want it configured in a certain way, right? With the solutions now, You can do that with your automation in the platform. You know the workloads are configured correctly. You know the identities and users are set up correctly. You know that the trust between workloads is set up correctly and not too much. So you can actually make the developer's job easier by doing it in a thoughtful way. And I think, kind of dovetailing right into what I was saying, I've never met a developer who's happy when their application got hacked, right? They're never like, whoa, let's go celebrate, right? They as a many year old developer, you take it personally, right? What happened? How did they get in? Developers want to know what broke. So helping them, right, solve that problem, if you do it in the right way, they're going to be open to it, right? The challenge is we walk in, we say, here's our standard, thou must use, rather than sitting down with them and saying, okay, what are you trying to do? How can we get to a place where we're both happy, right? I like referring to them as guardrails now. Look, between here and here, you can do anything you want. We're comfortable with it, you're comfortable with it, but you got to stay in here. If you're going to stray from that model, then we got to have another talk. And 9 times out of 10, that's more than enough leniency for any application stack to be built. So I really think it's an approach. I think and really it's an awareness that we all have to work together, right? Just like Ira was saying, it's not thou shalt do this or else I'm not going to let you roll into production, because we already know as soon as you say no, they just go a different way and do it anyway, right? And not just developers, anybody, network engineers, system engineers, whatever. So really kind of finding that way to use automation, especially in the cloud environment, and to really help them push a button, have what they need automatically fire off and get stood up, and then they can go code to their heart's content. That we need to get to that point.
Mm-hmm. And I do have to, though, say that a lot of the problem that I've seen in the past relates specifically to the cybersecurity people more than the developers, because the developers, I remember when I was working with them, they were like, just tell me what I need to do clearly.
Exactly.
And I don't, it's like an annoyance, but at the end of the day, I just want to do it, get it over with, so we're all happy. There's no last minute stops of code going into production because my code doesn't fit some criteria.
Right.
If we could embed it, like John says, and everything, in the way we roll out environments or stand up a instance, whatever the terminology is. Again, I'm bad with names, but it'll be so much better. But cybersecurity people need to learn the language and just set expectations properly. Because like John said, nobody really wants their software to be hacked. They just, however, might be a little bit too eager to get their product into production.
Right.
So we are cruising. So I think my next topic or tip for consideration is around collaborating with other teams. But I think you touched on it, the security and developer teams. Driving that collaboration can really help to optimize your entire stack and development lifecycle. But let's go to the next item, which I just want to touch on time, considering time spent. Time is our most valuable resource. We don't have a lot of it. So, back to earlier in the conversation, managing, we'll just say 150 tools. Each of those tools, they have their own interfaces, often siloed, they don't communicate, different viewpoints. A single source of truth, John, or a platform, you were talking about that a little bit. Would love to get your opinions on how this can help lower an organization's risk posture and provide better visibility for more informed decision-making, noise reduction. Alert fatigue, everyone loves that. So
yeah. So I think, look, I think one of the biggest challenges that we have is we use a different language in a lot of cases, right? Like Ira said, walk into a developer and they go, okay, just tell me what you want me to do, right? But we want to talk in this, high level theoretical risk and all this other kind of stuff. By using a consolidated platform, and when I say by using, I don't mean just the security teams, right? I mean, when the DevOps team should use the same platform, push the same button to generate their workloads as the security team is using to validate the workloads, right? Bringing that together under a single common platform enables you to use the same terms, the same words, and understand things the same, right? I think there's just so much of a challenge of, the different vernacular, different approaches. I think that causes a lot of the problems. So being able to get to that single source of truth, having, workload ABC, we know that that's going to, bring up your LAMP stack and everything else you need. And the DevOps team is happy with it. The security team's happy with it. Having it in that one place where you can audit it, where you can, because now the alert fatigue is going from, okay, if we know there's a problem in one, we know there's a problem in many, right? So we know we have a much better way to quantify the risk rather than having to go out and scan and try to figure out if that same vulnerability or risk is in every single workload that's running, right? If we use these models, it is far easier for the security team to go, okay, we need the timeout. We need to fix this. Log4j, Ira, you mentioned earlier, right? Perfect example. We need to go fix this across the platform, right? How we do that, whatever, but we need to go fix this rather than going, well, it's going to take us 3 weeks to figure out if we have the problem. That is what the consolidation, a consolidated platform brings us, right? It makes everybody's life on both sides of the fence I think it makes it so much cleaner, and you get rid of the alerts, you get rid of the debates on, what is secure, what's insecure, what's risky, what's not. The decision making is, it's almost, we can almost automate it. I mean, honestly, it's you get to a point where everybody is in agreement. You're using the same platform. And it truly, that single source of truth makes everyone's life better.
Yeah, and I wouldn't tend to, I agree wholeheartedly. And this kind of sort of touches, like, I'm not sure if like the intent was, for example, to work with a single platform, which might indicate, here's a product from a vendor that has a lot of applications to it, like different, like, for example, Aqua, that has many different components of implementing cloud security. And to me, that is, I'll answer the question that way because first off, from just a logistical perspective, when I look at it, I just want to sign one contract. I don't want to sign a different contract for every different tool out there. A lot of people, some organizations, if they're large enough, maybe they want best in breed for everything, and they can afford that and they can deal with it because it's not just paying for it. It's not just the contracting and everything. It's a matter of bringing in the vendors, training everybody on a new product, being able to maintain it by the maintenance team, not just by the developers, not just by the security team who have to use it, but how do you keep it working? How do you get it integrated and so on? And just in general, I found that platforms may not necessarily always be best of breed in every individual application, but it just makes my life so much easier to be able to go to one vendor for a suite of tools that integrate well. And I have to caveat that say integrate well, because, for example, what was the old joke? CA, I don't know if they still exist anymore. But when CA was out there, it's like, what was the joke where good software goes to die? Yeah. And they would buy companies and then they buy them and then they try to like kind of sort of make it work. I know, for example, like my friends at Proofpoint were telling me that they actually did a stand down because Proofpoint went ahead and did a lot of acquisitions. And they would buy, for example, a phishing vendor. They had a DLP, they had to bring in DLP. They had to bring in secure email gateways and everything. And then they had all these tools which should theoretically work well, or let's just say they were synergistic. But because the underlying code base wasn't the same and they were like shoving things through APIs and everything like that, it just didn't work as well. So they did a stand down to make everything go seamlessly, where you can integrate the products well. You can look at the single pane of glass. You don't have to rewrite your internal processes to make one thing work with another. Microsoft, because I was talking, a lot of companies are growing through acquisitions. So that, for example, Palo Alto, I don't know how they react to this. So I'm not making a criticism or a compliment, but Palo Alto is trying to grow their way into being as much of a comprehensive zero trust vendor as Zscaler, for example. And they're buying lots of tools. Hopefully they figure out how to make those tools work together, because zero trust is a buzzword. There is no zero trust product, but what you need to have is, the functions of zero trust that work well together. Now, likewise, Aqua's been developing most of it in-house, so it allows for a seamless way to bring cloud security together in a single platform, which I like. But, easy contracting, might it be best of breed? I'd hopefully like to think some of it is best of breed, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter for convenience and functionality purposes, because, frankly, there's an expression from Benjamin Franklin, which hopefully I never overuse in practice. The saying's great. I can't use it enough, but in practice, it's like the expression is done is better than perfect. And I'd rather be done than perfect, although hopefully it doesn't suck, even though it's done.
Hard to be perfect anyway. So, and again, as fast as our world changes, perfect will never be done. So I'm with you on that one.
Thanks, guys. Someone in the chat said, is our job as DevOps going to be taken away by AI soon?
What's their definition of soon? Because they are actually, there is like almost, it is almost Skynet, where there are going to be self-programming software, or at least software that programs other software. Because, at the end of the day, a lot of software development is really just gathering lots of other programs, which is why the supply chain is so hard, because people are not writing their own code from scratch. They're pulling, I'll just refer to it as my old days as library programs, and kind of kludging together lots of programs available from GitHub or wherever else. And to the extent that, again, not exactly a very hard thing to do in many software cases. So is it available now? I'm sure somebody's doing it. Somebody will say, how could I not know this? What an idiot. But, there are people who are likely doing this, but I think that's going to be a prime place where they are going to start implementing machine learning and elsewhere, and call it generative AI software development.
If I see generative AI one more time, I feel like it's following me around. It's everywhere.
Yes.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I had to actually look up what generative AI meant the other day after I answered a question on it. Luckily, I guessed well, but they just started using this term, and it's like pretty much everywhere. Yeah. Just in case anybody doesn't know what it means, and I do not fault you for not knowing what it means, generative AI means that the computer is creating something on its own. So, for example, you go to ChatGPT, it writes out a text-based answer. That is generative AI. If you have artwork where you see the AI artwork that generated the artwork, that's generative AI. It literally is as simplistic as that, even though they make it sound so sophisticated.
That they do. All right, so we've got about 5 minutes left. I want to leave some time for Q&A. So folks, if you have any questions, please feel free to throw them in the chat, or the Q&A rather. But I'll close out with this question to you guys. So, we had great conversations, talked about all the different tools that people have at their disposal, the tools in their tool belt. With so many different tools and solutions available. How can one prioritize what should be, focused on, and how do you determine which ones are going to have the most positive effect on the risk mitigation and overall security of one's organization?
Teen, you're right up.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm so biased on this. There's no way around it because that's a very common question. That's why I joined the company I joined. But at the end of the day, we do go ahead and we map out not just cyber risk quantification, which is really just a numbers, pretty pictures game, to actually making it useful and figuring out what is the actual cost of a vulnerability along with the probability. So you can figure out, okay, what is the actual risk of a vulnerability, which is cost times probability. And then figure out, okay, then what's the cost to mitigate that vulnerability? And that's the way theoretically it should be done. But again, it takes mapping out the network. And I'm not saying we're the only people that have the capability to do this. If you can go ahead and you can use, for example, in the absence of great software, flow modeling and things like that, you could potentially use red teams to figure out, okay, here's how a given threat can get to a given asset. And maybe I can map out where there's overlap between, okay, where's a network? Where do these networks come in? Like such as an insider might get access to a password file or something, outsider get access to the password file or whatever the case may be. You can start to see where to mitigate that. And that does take a lot of work. And that's how I would recommend you do something to that effect.
Yeah. And, I'm just going to kind of tack onto that for a little bit. One of the biggest challenges that I've historically had is getting that kind of message understood by non-security people, but more importantly, non-technical people. Right, specifically the board. So when the biggest mistake I see some CISOs making is walking into a board meeting saying we have 1.75 million vulnerabilities across our infrastructure, and then they come back to the next quarter and it's actually higher in that level, right? Even though the teams have applied patches and done all this other kind of stuff, right? So getting that risk quantification discussion away from the FUD, the FUD numbers of raw vulnerabilities just to try to jump your budget up, it's better long-term for your program, right? It's just talking about vulnerabilities in the pure state that they are is just, I personally think it's a huge mistake way too many people make in trying to either justify their budget or justify their jobs.
Yeah,
it really needs to be a risk discussion, and kind of like you said, it's about how critical is the vulnerability in my environment, given my controls in this time frame. So.
Yeah, and there's a reason why, for example, you walk in most organizations and the COO has an MBA, the CFO has an MBA, all the other C-level people, even the CIO has an MBA in most cases. Mm-hmm. And the reason is because they know how to talk business. We go in and I'm not saying every CISO needs to have an MBA. I don't have an MBA, but in my degree studies, luckily, I came across the concept of applying business principles to whatever you're doing. Mm-hmm. And cybersecurity needs to know it. Again, it goes down to being able to deserve what you need. Yep. Means you make the business case. A COO doesn't say, look, we kind of need to get the factory because the factory isn't, we need to revamp the whole factory because the factory is just not efficient. And I want to upgrade it because it would just be more efficient if I did. They go in and say, look, right now we have production of blah, blah, blah. We're going to go ahead and I want to go ahead and retool the entire factory. The retooling means it will cost me X amount of money. I'm then going to go ahead and in return, we'll take a short-term hit. We will return a Y increase once we get the retooling complete. Yep. We're not doing it in cybersecurity, which again has been my frustration since 1996. And we need to start doing that, whether it's cloud security or anything else. People don't care. I mean, nobody cares. Oh, is it in the cloud? Nobody says, oh, great, it's in the cloud. Gold star for you. They just care. is my system up and running? And are you able to, for example, keep my website generating me $23 million a minute or whatever the case is? That's what they want to hear.
Yep.
I could see a future conversation around this topic alone. I think there's a lot to unpack there. CISOs in the boardroom. Yeah. All right. Cody, do you want to bring us home?
I sure can. Thank you, Joe. And John, Ira, thank you both for joining us as well. It was such an insightful conversation, and I had no idea what all goes through the mind of a CISO on a daily basis. So this is such an insight. It's really cool. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cody.
So I would like to remind our audience that our session today was recorded. You will be receiving an email with a link to access this recording on demand. You can also find it living on the Security Boulevard website at securityboulevard.com/webinars, and just be sure to look in the on-demand section. The 4 winners of our $25 Amazon gift card giveaway, they are Gaston V, Lori G, Javier G, and Lindomar F. So to our 4 winners, congratulations. Keep an eye on your email inbox to claim your gift card. You should be receiving that in about the next 48 hours. If you don't happen to see it, check your spam folder just in case it gets filtered out. I'd like to thank Aqua for sponsoring our program today. And to everyone still here with us, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate and value your time, and we just want to ask for one more moment for a survey that will pop up as soon as we close out. Go ahead and tell us what you thought about our program today, or if you have recommendations for a follow-up conversation, please do let us know there. Regardless, we do hope to see everyone at a future Techstrong learning experience. Have a great rest of your day, and Joe, John, Ira, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much. Take care.